The champagne flute felt heavier than it should have in my hand, as I watched my daughter Emma laugh with her new in-laws at her wedding reception. Everything changed in a single moment when she took the microphone during the formal toasts and publicly called me a broke failure compared to her wealthy mother-in-law, Patricia Whitmore. The elegant ballroom filled with uncomfortable whispers as 200 guests turned to stare at me. My hand trembled slightly, but I kept my composure knowing what they didn't. I'd been hiding my fortune for 20 years, and the recording in my pocket would shatter every assumption in this room. 3 months before that devastating wedding day, I was living my usual quiet life in my modest ranch house on the outskirts of Denver. The morning Emma called to announce her engagement, I was working on my 15-year-old Ford pickup truck, in the garage grease, under my fingernails, and contentment in my heart. The simple life I'd chosen after selling my tech company had given me peace, but that peace was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. "Dad, I'm engaged." Emma's voice bubbled through the phone with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. His name is Preston Whitmore III, and his family owns half the commercial real estate in Colorado. The emphasis on his family's wealth made something twist in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling aside. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. When do I get to meet this young man who's stolen my daughter's heart?" "Actually, his parents want to host a dinner next weekend at their estate in Cherry Hills." "You'll love them, Dad. They're so sophisticated." That word sophisticated carried a weight that settled between us like a stone. Emma had never cared about sophistication before Laura died. My wife's death 5 years ago had changed our daughter in ways I was still trying to understand. The following Saturday, I drove my pickup through the gates of the Whitmore estate, feeling like I was entering another world. The mansion sprawled across manicured grounds that probably cost more to maintain annually than most people earned. Preston met us at the door, all gleaming teeth, and practiced charm, his handshake firm, but somehow dismissive. "Mr. Thompson," he said, his eyes already moving past me to Emma. "So glad you could make it." Patricia Whitmore appeared in the foyer, like she'd been staged there, diamonds catching the light from the chandelier above. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, as she looked me over, taking in my simple button-down shirt and khakis. "Dante, how lovely to finally meet Emma's father," she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but lovely. "She's told us so much about you. A postal worker, wasn't it? How wonderfully steadfast." I opened my mouth to correct her, but Emma jumped in quickly. "Dad's retired now. He lives simply, always has." The way she said simply made it sound like an apology. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have hosted a state dinner. Richard Whitmore, Preston's father, dominated the conversation with stories about their latest acquisitions and developments. Each anecdote seemed carefully chosen to highlight their wealth and influence. "Of course not. Everyone understands the complexities of high-stakes real estate," Richard said, cutting his prime rib with surgical precision. "It takes a certain caliber of mind." Patricia nodded, her gaze sliding to me. "Absolutely. Though I'm sure delivering mail had its own simple pleasures. There's something to be said for a life without ambition." The insult was wrapped in silk, but it was still an insult. I took a slow sip of water, remembering Laura's words about killing with kindness. I've found that ambition means different things to different people. For some, it's about accumulating wealth. For others, it's about accumulating moments with the people they love. Emma's face flushed. "Dad's very philosophical," she said quickly. "He reads a lot now that he's retired." "How charming," Patricia murmured in a tone that suggested it was anything but. After dinner, while the others toured the wine cellar, I stepped onto the terrace for some air. Through the French doors, I could hear Emma talking with Preston and his mother. "I'm so sorry about my father," Emma was saying. "I know he's not what you're used to. He's always been content with so little. Sometimes, I think he actively avoids success." "Don't worry, darling," Patricia's voice carried clearly. "Once you're properly part of our family, you won't have to apologize for your background anymore. We'll make sure you have everything you deserve." Unlike my father, Emma said, and the bitterness in her voice hit me like a physical blow. He could have been so much more, but he just gave up. After Mom died, he just retreated into this small life. It's embarrassing, honestly. I stood frozen on the terrace, my hand gripping the railing. My daughter, my Emma, was ashamed of me. The little girl who used to brag about her daddy to anyone who would listen, now saw me as an embarrassment to be explained away. What Emma didn't know, what I'd never told her, was that 5 years ago, I'd sold my software company Dataflow Solutions for $47 million. The company I'd built from nothing, working 18-hour days, while Laura supported us through her teaching job, had revolutionized inventory management systems for major retailers. But when Laura got sick, nothing mattered except being with her. I'd sold everything, liquidated the empire I'd built, because my wife needed me. Every treatment, every specialist, every moment by her bedside was worth more than any amount of money. After she died, I couldn't bear to return to that world. The money sat in various accounts and investments, growing quietly, while I chose to live simply the way Laura and I had lived when we were young, and building our dreams together. I'd kept it secret from Emma, because I wanted to know she loved me for who I was, not what I had. But listening to her apologize for my existence, I realized my test had revealed more than I'd bargained for. On the drive home, Emma chattered about wedding plans and how generous the Whitmores were being. They want to handle everything, she said. The country club, the flowers, the catering. Patricia says I shouldn't worry about budgets, just about being beautiful. I'd like to contribute, I offered. It's traditional for the bride's father to help with wedding expenses. Emma actually laughed. Dad, please. You can barely afford your mortgage. Let's not pretend you could contribute anything meaningful to a Whitmore-level wedding. The casual cruelty of her words made my chest tight. Emma, when did money become the measure of what's meaningful? She sighed the way she used to when she was 16, and thought I didn't understand anything. Since always, Dad. You just never wanted to see it. Mom protected you from reality, and now you hide in that little house pretending the world hasn't moved on. I love you, but I'm not going to pretend you're something you're not. That night, I sat in my study looking at photos of Laura. In our favorite picture taken just months before her diagnosis, we were laughing at some forgotten joke, her head thrown back in pure joy. She'd always seen the best in people, always believed love was the only currency that mattered. I think I've made a terrible mistake, I whispered to her photo. I wanted to test if people valued me without the money, but I never meant to teach our daughter that I had no value at all. The next morning, I called Marcus Chen, my former business partner, and the only person besides my lawyer who knew the truth about my finances. She said, "What?" Marcus's voice boomed through the phone. "Dante, you need to tell her the truth. This has gone too far." "Not yet," I said. "I need to understand how deep this goes." Something changed in Emma after Laura died, and I missed it. I was so lost in my own grief that I didn't see her drifting away. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done years ago," I said. "Pay attention." Over the next few weeks, I watched and listened. Emma visited less frequently, always seemed in a hurry to leave. When she did come by, she'd look around my simple home with barely concealed disdain. She'd make comments about how I should sell the place, move into a small apartment, be practical about your future. One afternoon, while she was in the bathroom, her phone buzzed with a text. The preview on the screen made my blood run cold. "Did you talk to him about the house yet? Remember, we need to document everything for Dr. Morrison." Dr. Morrison. Why was Emma discussing me with a doctor? I started paying closer attention, started documenting our conversations. I installed a simple recording app on my phone, perfectly legal in Colorado, as long as one party knew about the recording. What I discovered over the following days chilled me to the bone. Emma wasn't just embarrassed by me. She and the Whitmores were planning something far worse. 2 months before the wedding, the full scope of Emma's transformation became brutally clear. She'd excluded me from every aspect of the wedding planning, claiming the Whitmores had graciously offered to handle all the details. When I tried to stay involved, she'd wave me off with increasingly dismissive excuses. Patricia has an event planner who's done royal weddings, she told me during one of her brief visits. There's really nothing for you to worry about. I'd still like to contribute something, I persisted. What about the rehearsal dinner? Or even just helping with the guest list? Emma set down her coffee cup with exaggerated patience. Dad, the guest list is mostly Preston's family and their business associates, people who expect a certain standard. And honestly, you can barely afford your utilities. Let's not pretend you could cover a dinner at the country club. The contempt in her voice was no longer subtle. My own daughter spoke to me like I was a charity case, someone to be managed and minimized. What hurt most was the casual way she dismissed my entire life as if working hard and living modestly was something shameful. Your mother and I hosted plenty of dinners, I reminded her quietly. We knew how to entertain. That was different, Emma said, already gathering her things to leave. Mom had class. She understood how to move in different circles. You never tried to be more than you were. After she left, I sat in the kitchen, where Laura and I had shared thousands of meals where Emma had done her homework and told us about her day. The house felt hollow without Laura's warmth, but Emma's words made it feel like a tomb. That evening, Marcus stopped by with Chinese takeout, something he'd been doing more frequently since Laura passed. We ate in comfortable silence until he finally spoke. She's not the same girl, Dante. Grief changes people, but this is something else. I know, I admitted. Sometimes I look at her and wonder where my daughter went. Laura would be heartbroken. Laura would knock some sense into her, Marcus said firmly. Remember when Emma was 16 and went through that phase where she only wanted designer clothes? Laura made her volunteer at the homeless shelter for a month. Straightened her right out. I smiled at the memory. Emma came home the first day in tears, saying she'd met a woman who used to be a teacher, just like her mom. Changed her whole perspective. So what changed it back? I think I did, I said slowly. After Laura died, I retreated. Sold the company, stopped fighting, stopped pushing. Maybe Emma saw that as giving up. You were grieving, Marcus said. We all were. Laura was. She was the heart of every room she entered. But Emma needed me to be strong, and instead, I chose to be quiet. I wanted peace, but maybe she needed to see that her father was still somebody who mattered in the world. Marcus leaned back, studying me. It's not too late to show her. I'm starting to think it might be, I said. There's something else going on, Marcus. Something about a doctor and documentation. I think Emma might be planning something. The next day, I decided to do some investigating of my own. I drove to Emma's apartment complex in downtown Denver, parking where I could see her unit. Preston's Maserati was in the visitor's lot, so I waited. An hour later, they emerged together, Emma carrying a folder that she handled carefully. I followed at a distance as they drove to a medical building in the tech center. They were inside for nearly 2 hours. When they finally emerged, Emma looked pleased with herself, tucking the folder into her designer bag, like it contained something precious. That evening, I called in a favor from an old friend who worked in hospital administration. Without violating any privacy laws, she confirmed that a Dr. Morrison was a psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was uglier than I'd imagined. My daughter wasn't just ashamed of me. She was laying groundwork to have me declared incompetent. I hired James Sullivan, a private investigator recommended by my lawyer. James was a former FBI agent who specialized in financial fraud and family disputes. When I explained the situation, his expression grew grave. I've seen this before, he said. Family members who think there's an inheritance to grab, even when there isn't one. They start documenting eccentric behavior, building a case. Living modestly, driving an old truck, choosing simplicity. It can all be twisted to suggest cognitive decline. But Emma thinks I'm broke, I said. What could she possibly gain? Your house for starters. Life insurance policies. Maybe she thinks your retirement accounts are worth more than you let on. Or maybe the Whitmores are pushing this thinking there might be hidden assets. Rich families often assume everyone hides wealth. I gave James full authorization to investigate, though my heart broke at the necessity. While he worked, I continued playing my part, attending wedding planning sessions when invited, always seated at the edges, always treated like an afterthought. During a meeting at the country club about reception seating, Patricia Whitmore delivered what she clearly thought was a generous gesture. "Dante, we've arranged a lovely table for you with some of Emma's distant relatives. Table 19 near the service entrance. You'll be more comfortable there with people more familiar." "Table 19, I repeated. "But won't Emma want her father closer during the reception?" Patricia's smile was all condescension. "Oh, the head table is just for the wedding party and immediate family. You understand." "I am immediate family," I said quietly. "Of course you are," Patricia said in a tone that suggested I was anything but. "But we have certain protocols to follow. Governor Phillips will be attending, and several state senators. We need to be mindful of the optics." Emma, who had been reviewing flower arrangements, didn't even look up. Her silence spoke volumes about where her loyalties now lay. That night, I went through old photo albums, looking for the moment when everything changed. There were pictures of Emma at 5, covered in finger paint and beaming. Emma at 10, proudly showing off her science fair project we'd built together. Emma at 16, rolling her eyes but smiling as Laura forced us all into matching Christmas sweaters. And then, the pictures from after Laura's diagnosis. Emma's smiles became forced, her eyes harder. By the time of Laura's funeral, she looked at the camera like it was an enemy. And in every picture since, she seemed to be looking past me, through me, as if I was already a ghost. James called me a week later with his initial findings. "You need to sit down for this," he warned. The Whitmores, he explained, were in financial trouble. Their real estate empire was leveraged to the hilt, built on creative financing that bordered on fraud. They needed liquid capital desperately, and they'd been systematically targeting elderly relatives and family friends using various schemes to gain control of assets. "Emma's not the first young person they've recruited," James said. "They find someone vulnerable, usually grieving or isolated, and convince them that their family members are holding them back. They promise wealth and status in exchange for help accessing those family members' assets." "But Emma knows I don't have money," I protested. "At least she thinks she knows." "They might suspect otherwise. You live below your means, but you live comfortably. No debt house paid off, never asking for help. To someone like the Whitmores, that suggests hidden resources. They're probably convinced you have a secret retirement fund or life insurance they can access. Through Emma. If you're declared incompetent, Emma becomes your guardian. She controls your assets, makes your medical decisions, can sell your property. And guess who's been coaching her through the process?" My hands were shaking as I absorbed this information. "How far has it gone?" "Far enough. They've already had preliminary meetings with Dr. Morrison. Emma's been keeping a journal documenting your decline. Things like wearing the same clothes repeatedly, maintaining an old vehicle, living in the past. All perfectly normal behaviors twisted to suggest dementia or depression, severe enough to require intervention. I thought about Laura then, about how she'd react to knowing our daughter had become this. The Emma she'd raised would never have conceived of such betrayal. But grief and greed had transformed her into someone unrecognizable. "What do I do?" I asked James. "You document everything. You prepare. And when the time comes, you show them all exactly who they're dealing with. But Dante, be careful. The Whitmores have destroyed families before. They won't hesitate to destroy yours." That night, I made a decision. I would attend Emma's wedding. I would play the part she'd assigned me, the pathetic father, the embarrassment to be minimized. But I would also be ready. I went to my safe and retrieved the DVD Laura had insisted on recording when she first got sick. For Emma's wedding, she'd said, her eyes bright with tears. "Promise me you'll save it for her wedding day." I'd promised, thinking it would be a message of love and hope. Now I wondered if Laura, with her uncanny ability to read people, had sensed something I'd missed. Had she known our daughter would need this reminder of who she used to be? The investigation continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Emma had given Preston power of attorney privileges, in case of emergency. She'd been slowly removing items from my house during her visits. Laura's jewelry, family photos, anything that might have value. Small thefts I hadn't noticed, because I'd trusted her completely. But the worst discovery came when James found evidence of a forged signature on a life insurance document, attempting to change the beneficiary from Emma to a trust controlled by the Whitmores. The forgery was clumsy, easily detected, but the intent was clear. "She's not just planning for your incompetence," James said grimly. "They're planning for your death." The words hit like physical blows. My daughter, my baby girl, was either complicit in or blind to a plan that treated my death as a financial opportunity. The Whitmores had poisoned her so thoroughly that I'd become nothing more than an obstacle to wealth. 2 weeks before the wedding, Emma made her final visit to my house. She walked through each room like an appraiser, making notes in her phone. "You really should consider downsizing," she said. "This place is too big for one person, and the maintenance must be overwhelming for someone your age." "I'm 65, not 95, I reminded her. "Still," she persisted, "it's important to be realistic about your limitations. Preston's family knows an excellent assisted living facility. Very dignified, very comfortable. I'm not ready for assisted living, Emma." She sighed, and for just a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, regret. But it passed quickly, replaced by the cold determination I'd grown accustomed to. "We all think we're not ready until something happens," she said. "Better to make these transitions while you still have some say in the matter." After she left, I called my lawyer, Harrison Clark, and told him everything. We spent hours preparing documentation, gathering evidence, building an ironclad case that would protect not just my assets, but my freedom. "They've made one crucial mistake," Harrison said. "They assume you're as helpless as you appear. That's going to be their downfall." The day before the rehearsal dinner, I sat in Laura's garden, the one she'd tended so lovingly, and I'd maintained in her memory. The roses were in full bloom, their scent carrying on the evening breeze. I could almost feel her presence, almost hear her voice. "I'm going to save her, Laura," I whispered to the flowers. "Even if she hates me for it, I'm going to save our daughter from what she's become." The war for Emma's soul was about to begin, and I would need all the strength Laura had left me with to see it through. The night before Emma's wedding arrived with the kind of crisp Colorado evening that Laura had always loved. As I dressed in my only suit, the one I'd worn to her funeral, I caught myself checking the pocket where I'd kept her recording. Not yet, I reminded myself. Tomorrow would bring its own reckonings. The Whitmores had chosen the Highlands Country Club for the rehearsal dinner, a place so exclusive that my truck looked like an insult in the valet line. The young attendant who took my keys barely concealed his smirk. "Sir, are you sure you're at the right entrance? The service entrance is around back." "I'm with the Whitmore Thompson wedding," I said calmly. His expression shifted to confusion, then skepticism. He checked his list 3 times before reluctantly taking my keys, holding them like they might contaminate his hands. At the entrance, I faced another obstacle. Security guards flanked the doors, checking names against a list. When I gave mine, they exchanged glances. "I'm sorry, sir, but you're not on the list," the taller guard said. "That's impossible. I'm the bride's father." They checked again, made a phone call, spoke in hushed tones. Finally, Preston appeared, looking irritated at the interruption to his evening. "It's fine," he said dismissively. "He's with us. There must have been a mix-up with the list." But the look he gave me said there had been no mix-up. They'd simply hoped I wouldn't show up. The private dining room sparkled with crystal and candlelight. 50 guests mingled with champagne flutes, all wearing the kind of effortless elegance that only money could buy. I recognized a few faces from Emma's childhood friends, who now looked through me as if I were invisible. Dante. Patricia Whitmore's voice carried across the room with false warmth. How wonderful that you could make it. Though I do hope you'll be more appropriately dressed tomorrow. Several heads turned at her comment, taking in my simple suit among their designer wear. I smiled, the kind of smile Laura had taught me to use when dealing with difficult people. I'll do my best not to embarrass anyone, I said. Oh, I'm sure you will, Patricia murmured, already turning away. Do help yourself to the buffet. I believe there's a nice meatloaf that might be more to your taste than the seafood towers. The casual cruelty of wealth had always amazed me. When I'd run my company, I'd watched executives treat others like furniture, as if a bank balance determined human worth. I'd promised Laura I'd never become that person, and keeping that promise had never felt more important than tonight. I found my assigned seat at a table in the corner, populated by Preston's distant relatives, who seemed as uncomfortable as I felt. An elderly aunt kept patting my hand and telling me how nice it was that they included the help in family events. During cocktails, I circulated carefully, listening more than speaking. The Whitmore's friends discussed vacation homes and stock portfolios with the casual ease of people who'd never wondered how to pay a bill. But underneath the polish, I heard strain. Whispered concerns about market volatility, nervous jokes about liquidity. James had been right. The Whitmores were drowning in debt, using each new acquisition to leverage the next, building a house of cards that required constant cash infusions. No wonder they'd targeted Emma. A young woman estranged from her supposedly poor father was perfect prey. Emma entered on Preston's arm, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. She moved through the room like royalty, accepting air kisses and compliments. When our eyes met across the room, she quickly looked away. Throughout dinner, I endured toast after toast, celebrating the joining of two great families. Richard Whitmore spoke about legacy and dynasty, about building empires that would last generations. Patricia gushed about gaining a daughter who understood the importance of elevation and refinement. Not one person mentioned love. When the formal toasts ended, Preston's groomsmen started the more casual tributes. They told stories about prep school and yacht clubs, about summers in the Hamptons and winters in Aspen. Each anecdote seemed calculated to emphasize a world I could never enter. Then, Preston's best man, a hedge fund manager named Bradley, decided to have some fun at my expense. I have to say, when Preston told me about Emma's background, I was skeptical. But she's proven that with the right influences, anyone can transcend their origins. He raised his glass toward me. No offense to Emma's father, of course. I'm sure delivering mail was honest work. Laughter rippled through the room, the kind that comes at someone else's expense. I felt my jaw tighten, but maintained my composure. Actually, I started to say, but Emma cut me off. Brad, you're terrible, she said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. But you're not wrong. I've learned so much from the Whitmores about what real success looks like. She went on, each word another dagger. I used to think my dad's simple life was noble. Now I realize it was just simple. Patricia and Richard have shown me that some people build legacies, while others just exist. The room fell silent for a moment, even the Whitmore's friends recognizing the harshness of her words. Then, Patricia started clapping, and others joined in celebrating my daughter's complete rejection of everything I'd tried to teach her. I excused myself, needing air. On the terrace, I found Marcus, who'd arrived late and witnessed the whole display. Dante, this has gone too far, he said. You need to tell her the truth. Tonight. Not yet, I said, though my resolve was wavering. Tomorrow. It has to be tomorrow. Why put yourself through this? Because Laura asked me to save the recording for the wedding. She knew something I didn't. She always did. Marcus shook his head but didn't argue. We stood in silence, looking out at the lights of Denver spread below us. Somewhere out there was the small apartment where Laura and I had started our life together, where we dreamed of the future while eating ramen noodles and believing love could conquer anything. Mr. Thompson. I turned to find a waiter holding a phone. There's an urgent call for you. It was James, my investigator. His voice was tense with urgency. Dante, I need to see you. Tonight. I've found something you need to know about before tomorrow. I gave him the address, and he said he'd meet me in the parking lot in 20 minutes. When I returned inside, the party had moved past the awkward moment of Emma's speech. Preston's mother was holding court, telling a story about their recent acquisition of a historic estate. Of course, we'll have to gut the interior completely, she was saying. These old places are charming but hardly functional for modern living. Something about the casual destruction of history, the easy dismissal of things that had stood for generations, made my decision crystallize. The Whitmores consumed everything they touched, turning beauty into commodity legacy, into leverage. They'd done the same to my daughter. In the parking lot, James waited in a nondescript sedan. The documents he showed me under the dome light made my blood run cold. They moved up their timeline, he said. Dr. Morrison filed a preliminary report yesterday, suggesting you're showing signs of cognitive decline. They're planning to petition for emergency conservatorship immediately after the wedding. Can they do that? With Emma's cooperation and their lawyers, they'll try. But that's not the worst part. He handed me another document. This is a life insurance policy taken out 6 months ago. You're the insured, Emma's the beneficiary, but the premiums are being paid by a shell company linked to the Whitmores. They took out life insurance on me. $2 million. Dante, these people don't just want control of your assets. They're creating a situation where your death would solve their financial problems. The implications hit me like a physical blow. My daughter, whether knowingly or through manipulation, was part of a plan that treated my death as a financial strategy. We have enough evidence to stop them, James continued. Your lawyer has everything prepared. But Dante, you need to be careful tomorrow. Desperate people do desperate things. I returned to the dinner as dessert was being served. Emma was laughing at something Preston whispered, her hand displaying the engagement ring that cost more than most people's annual salary. For a moment, she looked happy, truly happy, and I wondered if exposing the truth would destroy that happiness or free her from a terrible mistake. Patricia Whitmore clinked her spoon against her glass for one final toast. Tomorrow, we officially welcome Emma into our family, she said. And I want her to know that she's not just gaining a husband, but a whole new life. One where limitations are just starting points, where dreams have no ceiling, and where the past, she looked directly at me, can finally be left behind. The room erupted in applause. Emma beamed. Preston pulled her close, and I sat at my corner table invisible, and dismissed, counting down the hours until I could honor Laura's final wish. After the dinner, as guests departed in their luxury vehicles, Emma approached me for the first time all evening. Dad, about tomorrow, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Preston and I talked, and we think it would be better if Richard walks me down the aisle. You understand, right? He's been like a second father to me, and with all their connections attending. You want your actual father to sit in the audience, while another man gives you away. I kept my voice level, though my heart was shattering. Don't be dramatic, she said with the irritation of someone forced to deal with an unpleasant task. You'll still be there, just in a less visible role. It's what's best for everyone. Everyone except me. God, Dad, not everything is about you. Her mask slipped, showing the anger beneath. This is my wedding, my chance to start fresh. Why can't you just be happy for me? I've always been happy for you, Emma. Even now, when you're breaking my heart, I love you. Something flickered in her eyes, a ghost of the daughter I'd raised. But Preston appeared, wrapping his arm around her possessively. Everything okay here? He asked the question directed at Emma, but his cold gaze fixed on me. It's fine, Emma said quickly. Dad was just leaving. I drove home through empty streets, my old truck rumbling faithfully through the night. In my pocket, Laura's recording felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Tomorrow, I would play it. Tomorrow, I would reveal the truth. Tomorrow, I would either save my daughter or lose her forever. But tonight, I sat in my simple home surrounded by photographs of better days and grieved for the family we used to be. Laura had always said that love meant fighting for someone, even when they didn't want to be saved. Tomorrow, I would find out if she was right. The war for Emma's soul would be won or lost in a ballroom full of strangers with the ghost of her mother as my only ally. I prayed it would be enough. I woke before dawn on Emma's wedding day, the weight of what lay ahead settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. Laura's side of the bed remained untouched, as it had for 5 years, but this morning, I could almost feel her presence, almost hear her whisper of encouragement. In my study, I reviewed everything one final time. Bank statements showing my true net worth documentation of the $47 million from Dataflow's sale investment portfolios that had grown substantially through careful management. Harrison Clark, my lawyer, had prepared sealed envelopes containing evidence of the Whitmore's fraud, Emma's forged signatures, and the sinister insurance policies. Ruth Martinez, my accountant, had compiled 5 years of charitable donations, including the Children's Hospital wing, named after Laura. The recording sat in its protective case, Laura's handwriting on the label, "For Emma's wedding day, all my love, Mom." My phone rang at 6:30. Harrison's voice was grim. "Dante, we have a problem. Dr. Morrison moved faster than expected. There's a petition for emergency conservatorship being filed Monday morning. If they get a sympathetic judge, you could be under Emma's control by the end of the week." "Then we proceed as planned," I said. "Today. Are you sure once this becomes public, there's no going back? Emma might never forgive you." "If I do nothing, I lose her anyway. At least this way she'll know the truth." After Harrison hung up, I called Marcus and confirmed he and several other old friends would attend the wedding. "We'll be your army," he promised. "Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." I spent the morning preparing carefully. My single suit was clean and pressed my shoes polished. I trimmed my beard, combed my gray hair. Looking in the mirror, I saw an ordinary man staring back. Not the tech entrepreneur who'd built an empire, not the millionaire who'd walked away from it all, just a father preparing to fight for his daughter's soul. At noon, Ruth arrived with the sealed envelopes. "I've made copies of everything," she said. "The forensic accounting on the Whitmores is damning. They're running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme using new investors to pay off old ones. The whole thing could collapse any day." "What about the insurance policies?" 3 different policies totaling $5 million. All taken out in the last year, all with premiums paid by Whitmore shell companies. "Dante, these aren't people planning for your natural death." The implications chilled me, but I'd moved past fear into determination. "Are the projections ready for the reception?" "Everything's arranged. The venue's AV system will display whatever you need. Harrison has originals of all documents in case anyone challenges their authenticity." "And the recording?" "Converted to digital, backed up multiple times. When you're ready, it'll play on every screen in the ballroom." I thanked her, grateful for the team of professionals who'd rallied around me. They'd known me during my corporate days, had watched me walk away from everything to care for Laura. Not one had questioned my decision then, and none questioned my actions now. At 2 o'clock, I received a text from Emma. "Remember, you don't need to walk me down the aisle. Richard will handle it. Just sit quietly and don't make a scene." The casual cruelty of it, delivered by text on her wedding day, demonstrated how far she'd fallen. The Emma who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, who'd called me her hero at her college graduation, was gone. In her place stood a stranger who saw me as an embarrassment to be managed. I arrived at the Grandview Estate at 3:30, the sprawling venue bustling with activity. Florists arranged towering centerpieces, while musicians tuned instruments. The Whitmores had spared no expense creating a fairy tale setting that masked the rot beneath. At the entrance, I was stopped again by security. This time, Preston's cousin handled it with barely concealed disdain. "Mr. Thompson, you're at table 19. Please proceed directly there and wait for the ceremony to begin." Table 19 was tucked in a corner near the service entrance, as far from the main action as possible, while still technically being in the room. My tablemates included Emma's great-aunt from Seattle, who suffered from dementia, two cousins she hadn't seen in a decade, and Preston's childhood nanny. We were the discards, the obligation invites. As guests arrived, I watched the cream of Colorado society air kiss and compare jewelry. Politicians, business titans, old money mixing with new. These were the people Emma now valued the world she was choosing over family. Harrison appeared at my elbow impeccably dressed and radiating quiet confidence. "Everything's in place. Ruth is coordinating with the AV team. Your friends are positioned throughout the room." "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "Laura was a dear friend," he replied. "She'd be proud of what you're doing." At 4 o'clock, guests were directed to the ceremony space in the estate's gardens. I found my assigned seat in the 5th row, behind Preston's extended family and business associates. The front row, where the father of the bride should sit, remained empty on our side. The Whitmores filled their front row completely. The music began, and the wedding party processed down the aisle. Bridesmaids in lavender, groomsmen in gray, all perfectly coordinated. Then, the music changed to the wedding march, and everyone stood. Emma appeared at the garden entrance, breathtaking in a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. On her arm walked Richard Whitmore, chest puffed with pride, playing the role that should have been mine. As they passed my row, Emma's eyes found mine for just a moment. Something flickered there, maybe regret, maybe defiance, before she looked away. Richard Whitmore's smirk was less subtle, a clear message that he'd won, that I'd been successfully replaced. The ceremony itself was a blur of readings and vows that mentioned partnership and prosperity, but never once used the word love. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, the Whitmore's security team actually shifted positions, ready to remove anyone who might dare disrupt their perfect production. I held my tongue. The ceremony wasn't my battlefield. The reception would be. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, and Preston kissed Emma with the passion of someone claiming a prize. The crowd erupted in applause, and the recessional began. As the wedding party swept past, Patricia Whitmore caught my eye and winked a victorious general, acknowledging the defeated enemy. During the cocktail hour, I remained at my exile table, watching Emma and Preston work the room. She moved differently now, each gesture calculated, each smile practiced. The spontaneous joy I'd seen at her college graduation, the genuine warmth she'd shown at Laura's bedside, had been replaced by this polished performance. Marcus found me there, bringing reinforcements. "The gang's all here," he said. Friends from my business days, people who'd known Emma since she was small, surrounded my table. "Whatever happens next, you're not alone." The ballroom doors opened for dinner, revealing a spectacle of flowers, crystal, and gold. The Whitmores had created a palace for the evening, a stage for their triumph. My table 19 was indeed near the service entrance, strategically placed, so the important guests wouldn't have to see the bride's disappointing father. As the newlyweds made their entrance to thunderous applause, I felt Laura's recording in my pocket. The evening's program showed speeches scheduled after dinner. Patricia Whitmore, Richard Whitmore, the best man, the maid of honor, and finally Emma. No mention of the father of the bride. Dinner was served in courses, each more elaborate than the last. At the head table, Emma laughed and whispered with her new family, never once looking toward table 19. The aunt with dementia kept asking me who was getting married, and I patiently explained, each time my heart breaking a little more. Between courses, Ruth appeared briefly at my side. "The files are loaded. Harrison has security watching the exits in case they try to remove you. Just give the signal." The moment was approaching when I would either save my daughter or lose her forever. Around me, The party continued oblivious to the storm about to break. The Whitmores celebrated their conquest. Emma reveled in her new status. And somewhere above us, Laura watched and waited. The war for truth was about to begin. The dinner plates were cleared away as the reception moved into the speech portion of the evening. Richard Whitmore took the microphone first, his voice booming with self-satisfaction as he welcomed everyone to celebrate the joining of two exceptional families. He spoke for 10 minutes about legacy and achievement, never once mentioning Emma's parents or her life before Preston. Patricia followed her speech a masterclass in veiled insults. Emma has shown such grace in rising above her circumstances. She said, her smile sharp as a blade. Not everyone can transition from a modest background to our world, but Emma has proven that with the right guidance, anyone can evolve. The crowd applauded politely, though I caught a few uncomfortable glances from people who recognized the condescension. At my table, Marcus gripped his water glass so tightly, I thought it might shatter. Preston's best man told stories about prep school pranks and yacht club adventures, each anecdote carefully chosen to emphasize a world of privilege. The maid of honor gushed about Emma's transformation and how Patricia had taken her under her wing like a mother. That stung. Laura had been gone only 5 years, and already she was being erased, replaced by this diamond-encrusted charlatan who saw my daughter as a project to be improved. Finally, Emma stood to give her speech. She moved to the microphone with practiced grace, the lights catching the crystals on her dress. The room fell silent, waiting for the bride's traditional words of gratitude and love. When I was young, Emma began, her voice clear and confident. I thought I understood what success looked like. I thought it was about being content with less, about finding joy in simple things. But then I met Preston and his wonderful family, and my eyes were opened to what life could really be. She paused, looking directly at Patricia and Richard. The Whitmores have shown me that success isn't about settling. It's about striving, achieving, building something that matters. Patricia, you've become the mother I needed, showing me how to carry myself with dignity and purpose. Each word was a dagger to my heart, but worse was coming. I look at my life before Preston, and I see limitations I didn't even know existed. My father, she turned to look at me for the first time all evening, is a good man in his way. But he represents a cautionary tale about what happens when you give up, when you stop fighting for more. The room grew uncomfortable. Even among this crowd, publicly humiliating one's parent was considered poor form. But Emma was just getting started. Unlike the Whitmores, who built an empire through vision and determination, my father chose the path of least resistance. After my mother died, instead of honoring her memory by achieving something meaningful, he retreated into a small life content to simply exist. Gasps rippled through the crowd. At the head table, Preston smiled encouragingly, while his parents nodded with approval. They'd coached her well, turned her into a weapon against her own family. My father is just a pathetic failure. Emma continued, her voice gaining strength, as if she'd been waiting to say these words for years. Nothing like the remarkable people I'm now blessed to call family. The Whitmores represent everything he could have been, but was too weak to pursue. They've shown me that some people are meant to lead, while others, like my dad, simply take up space. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 guests stared in shock at the bride who just eviscerated her father in public. Even some of the Whitmores' friends looked appalled. At my table, the aunt with dementia asked loudly, "Why is she being so mean to that nice man?" I stood slowly, my legs steadier than I expected. Marcus started to rise with me, but I gestured for him to stay seated. This was my moment, my battle to fight. As I walked toward the microphone, Preston's security team moved to intercept me, but Harrison had positioned himself perfectly, stepping forward with legal documents in hand. "I wouldn't," he said quietly to the lead security guard. "Mr. Thompson has every right to speak at his daughter's wedding. Any attempt to physically prevent him could be considered assault." The crowd watched in fascination As I approached the microphone where Emma stood, frozen her triumph, turning to uncertainty. Preston half rose from his chair, but Richard grabbed his arm, probably calculating whether making a scene would be worse than letting me speak. "Thank you for that introduction, Emma," I said quietly into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "Before we continue celebrating, I'd like to share something your mother wanted me to save specifically for this day." Emma's face drained of color. "Dad, don't do this," she whispered away from the microphone. "Your mother knew you better than anyone." I continued addressing the room, but keeping my eyes on my daughter. "When she was diagnosed with cancer, she insisted on recording a message for your wedding day. She made me promise to play it when the time was right." I pulled out my phone, and Ruth, stationed at the AV control board, activated the screens around the ballroom. Laura's face appeared on every monitor, thin from chemotherapy, but radiating the warmth that had defined her life. "My dearest Emma." Laura's voice filled the room, silencing even the whispers. "If you're watching this, it means you're getting married, and I'm not there to see it. I'm so sorry I can't be with you today, but I needed you to hear some things." On screen, Laura shifted in her hospital bed, gathering strength. "I know the last few years will be hard on you. Losing a parent changes us sometimes in ways we don't expect. You might find yourself angry at the world, maybe even at your father. You might chase external validation to fill the void I've left behind." Emma's hands trembled as tears began flowing down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "But sweetheart," Laura continued, "I need you to know the truth about your father. The truth he's probably been too humble to share. The man you call Dad built data flow solutions from nothing, working 20-hour days, while I taught school to support us. He created technology that revolutionized retail logistics, employed hundreds of people, and earned millions in the process." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. The Whitmores sat frozen, their carefully constructed narrative crumbling with each word. "When I got sick," Laura's voice grew softer, "your father didn't hesitate. He sold everything, liquidated his entire empire, because being with me mattered more than any amount of money. He held my hand through every treatment, slept in hospital chairs, and never once complained about what he'd given up." The screens showed Laura reaching toward the camera, as if trying to touch her daughter through time. "The $47 million from the sale. He used it to ensure I had the best care possible. He donated millions to cancer research and children's hospitals. He set up trusts for your future that he never told you about, because he wanted you to make your own way to value yourself for who you are, not what you might inherit." Emma sobbed openly now, her carefully constructed facade crashing down. Preston looked bewildered, his parents' faces cycling through shock, rage, and calculation. "Your father chose love over empire, family over fortune," Laura said. "He moved into that modest house because it reminded him of our first home together. He drives that old truck because he'd rather spend money on charity than status symbols. He lives simply not because he has to, but because he knows what truly matters." Laura paused, her eyes bright, with unshed tears. "If you're watching this surrounded by people who judge worth by net worth, who measure success only in dollars, then you've forgotten everything your father and I tried to teach you. But it's not too late, my darling girl. It's never too late to remember who you really are." The recording showed Laura holding up a photo, one of the three of us at Emma's high school graduation. "This is my family. A man who chose love over money, a daughter with a good heart, and me, the luckiest woman in the world to be loved by both of you. Don't let anyone convince you that this wasn't enough. It was everything." Laura's voice grew urgent, as if she knew her time was running short. "Emma, your father has documents, evidence of some things that might shock you. Trust him. Let him show you the truth. And remember, sweetheart, that love isn't measured in wedding presents or country club memberships. It's measured in sacrifice, in presence, in choosing someone's happiness over your own advancement." She smiled, then the radiant smile that had lit up every room she entered. "Be happy, my darling. But be happy as yourself, not as someone else's projection of who you should be. I love you forever. And your father. He loves you enough to let you hate him if it means saving you from a terrible mistake." The screen went dark. The ballroom remained silent, except for Emma's quiet sobs. Then, I spoke again, pulling documents from my jacket. "The Whitmores are bankrupt," I said clearly. "Their empire is built on fraud. Their wealth is borrowed, and they saw you, Emma, as a pathway to assets they believed I was hiding." I gestured to Harrison, who began distributing copies of the evidence to key tables. "They convinced you to help them have me declared incompetent. They took out life insurance policies on me, totaling $5 million. They prepared documents to seize my assets through you as my guardian." Each revelation landed like a hammer blow. Richard Whitmore jumped to his feet. "This is slander. I'll sue you for everything you're worth." "Everything I'm worth." I pulled out my financial statements. That would be approximately $47 million minus the $10 million I've donated to charity in Laura's name, plus investment gains over the past 5 years. So yes, Richard, please do sue me. My lawyers would love to depose you about your Ponzi scheme. The room erupted. Guests pulled out phones, some calling lawyers, others recording the unfolding drama. Several investors in Whitmore Properties headed for the exit, cell phones pressed to their ears. But I kept my focus on Emma, who stood at the microphone looking lost and broken. "I failed you," I said softly. "After Mom died, I retreated when you needed me to show you that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it chooses quiet dignity. I let you believe that modest meant unsuccessful, that simple meant failure. That's on me." Emma's voice cracked as she spoke. "The insurance policies, were those real?" "Ask your husband," I said. "Ask him why a healthy 65-year-old man needs $5 million in life insurance paid for by his in-laws." Preston's mask finally slipped. "Emma, don't listen to him. He's trying to ruin us." "Ruin you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're already ruined. The FBI has been investigating your father's company for months. The house of cards was always going to fall. You just wanted to grab what you could on the way down, and my daughter was your ticket." Patricia Whitmore shrieked something about lawsuits and defamation, but no one was listening anymore. The carefully orchestrated wedding had become a crime scene with evidence scattered across tables and victims realizing they'd been marks in an elaborate con. Through it all, Emma stood frozen at the microphone, tears streaming down her face as she finally saw the truth. The family she'd chosen over her own, the life she'd traded her integrity for the man she'd just married, all of it built on lies and greed. I walked back to my table, leaving chaos in my wake. The war was won, but looking at my daughter's devastated face, I wondered if the victory had come at too high a price. Sometimes, saving someone means letting them hate you for showing them the truth. Laura had understood that. I prayed that someday Emma would too. The ballroom descended into complete chaos after my revelations. But I wasn't finished. As Richard Whitmore shouted about lawsuits and Patricia shrieked demands at the security team, I returned to the microphone. "There's more," I said, my voice cutting through the pandemonium. The room gradually quieted, morbid fascination overcoming shock. "Emma, I know you've been removing items from my house. Your mother's jewelry, family photos, documents you thought might have value." Emma's face, already pale, went white as paper. I was keeping them safe," she stammered. "Safe, or cataloging assets for the Whitmores." I pulled out photographs from my jacket, surveillance images James had taken. "This is you leaving my house with boxes 3 weeks ago. This is Preston's car parked outside while you went through my study. This is you meeting with Dr. Morrison, the psychiatrist, who was prepared to declare me incompetent." Gasps rippled through the crowd as I laid out the evidence methodically. Harrison and Ruth moved through the room, distributing packets of documentation to influential guests, ensuring the truth couldn't be buried or spun. "But the most damning evidence," I continued, "isn't about theft or fraud. It's about what this family was willing to do for money. I held up the insurance documents. 5 separate policies. 3 in my name, 2 in Emma's. All purchased in the last year. All with the Whitmores, or their shell companies as beneficiaries. That's a lie. Preston finally found his voice pushing back from the head table. Emma, he's trying to destroy us because he's jealous. Emma looked between her new husband and me, confusion and growing horror warring on her face. Preston, tell me the truth. The insurance policies. They were just financial planning. Richard interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. Standard procedure for estate management. Standard procedure. I pulled out another document. This email from your attorney discusses the timeline for maximizing return on the Thompson investments. It specifically mentions that my deteriorating mental state could be leveraged for expedited resolution. Several guests headed for the exits, including 2 state senators, who clearly wanted no part of the scandal. But most remained transfixed by the unfolding drama. I turned back to Emma. They didn't just want you for your potential inheritance. They needed someone with access, someone who could document my decline, someone who could sign papers as my next of kin. You were never a daughter-in-law to them. You were a tool. Shut your mouth. Preston lunged forward, but Marcus and 2 other friends blocked his path. The younger man's mask had completely fallen away, revealing the desperate con artist beneath the polished exterior. Preston, sit down. Patricia hissed, still trying to salvage something from the wreckage. But it was too late. The dam had broken. One of the investors stood up, an elderly man I recognized as a major real estate developer. Richard, I want answers. Now. Is any of this true? Of course not, Charles. Richard began, but another voice interrupted. It's all true. Everyone turned to see a young woman standing near the back of the room. She was small, well-dressed, and trembling with what looked like a combination of fear and determination. My name is Jennifer Walsh, she said, her voice growing stronger. 2 years ago, the Whitmores did the same thing to my family. My grandmother, they convinced my cousin to have her declared incompetent. They got control of her assets, sold her properties, and when she died 6 months later, she paused visibly, gathering courage. The life insurance paid out $3 million. The room exploded again. Other voices joined in sharing similar stories. The Whitmore's scheme had been running for years, targeting elderly relatives through their younger family members, always following the same pattern isolation documentation of supposed declined conservatorship, and then waiting. Emma sank into a chair, her wedding dress pooling around her like a shroud. The full horror of what she'd been part of was written across her face. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know about the insurance. They said Dad needed help, that he was showing signs of dementia, that it was for his own good. Did I seem demented when I offered to pay for your wedding? I asked quietly. When I remembered every birthday, every anniversary, when I maintained Mom's garden exactly as she liked it? Or did they convince you to see what they wanted you to see? Patricia Whitmore made one last desperate play. This is all circumstantial. You can't prove anything. Our lawyers will destroy you. Your lawyers, Harrison spoke up from his position near the door, are currently being detained by the FBI. We provided them with evidence 3 hours ago. They're particularly interested in the 17 similar cases across 3 states. As if on cue, men and women in dark suits entered the ballroom. FBI badges flashed as they moved purposefully toward the Whitmore family. Richard Whitmore, Patricia Whitmore, Preston Whitmore. The lead agent announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and insurance fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The wedding guests watched in stunned silence as the Whitmores were handcuffed in their formal wear. Patricia's diamond necklace caught the light as she was led away, still shrieking about lawsuits and connections. Richard maintained stony silence, his empire crumbling with each step toward the exit. Preston looked back once at Emma, not with love or concern, but with pure rage at losing his mark. As they were let out, I moved to where Emma sat surrounded by the wreckage of her wedding. Her bridesmaids had fled, her new family was heading to federal custody, and 200 guests were witnessing her complete humiliation. But then, something unexpected happened. Marcus stepped forward, followed by others who had known Emma since childhood. They formed a protective circle around her, offering handkerchiefs and quiet words of support. The aunt with dementia patted Emma's hand and said, There, dear. We all make mistakes." "Emma," I said softly, kneeling beside her chair. "I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But they would have destroyed you along with everyone else. They were using you." "I helped them," she sobbed. "I gave them information, I documented things, Oh God, I called you pathetic. In front of everyone." "You were grieving," I said. "Missing your mother, searching for meaning. And they took advantage of that. They're professionals at manipulation." Jennifer Walsh approached hesitantly. "It's not your fault," she told Emma. "They did the same thing to me. Made me believe my grandmother was losing her mind, that I was helping her. By the time I realized the truth, it was too late." Emma looked up at her, then at me, then at the ruins of her reception. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you have a choice. You can stay married to a man who's going to federal prison, tied to a family that saw you as a commodity. Or you can remember who you really are." "The marriage can be annulled," Harrison offered quietly. "Given the fraud involved, no court would uphold it." Emma stood slowly, her designer dress seeming to weigh her down. She looked around the ballroom at the scattered evidence, the fleeing guests, the FBI agents cataloging the scene. Then, she reached up and removed the Whitmore family tiara from her hair, setting it on the table. "I need to see something," she said quietly. Ruth understood immediately, bringing up another video on the screens. This one wasn't from Laura's hospital bed, but from years earlier, a family video of Emma's college graduation. There was Laura, radiant with pride, and me beside her cheering as Emma walked across the stage. But what made Emma gasp was her own face in the video, genuine joy, untainted by greed or status-seeking, looking at her parents with pure love. "That's who you are," I said. "That's who you've always been underneath what they tried to make you." Emma turned to face the remaining guests, mascara streaking her cheeks, but spine straightening with each breath. "I owe you all an apology," she said, her voice growing stronger. "Especially you, Dad. I let grief and greed poison me. I chose wealth over family status, over love, and I nearly helped destroy the only parent I have left." She picked up the microphone one more time. "The Whitmores promised me a better life, but they nearly cost me my soul. My father, who I called pathetic, is worth 100 of them. He chose love over money, integrity over advancement, and even today, he chose saving me over protecting himself from humiliation." The remaining guests began to applaud slowly at first, then with growing warmth. They were applauding redemption, second chances, the possibility that people could come back from their worst mistakes. Emma walked over to me, wobbly in her designer heels. "Can you forgive me?" "There's nothing to forgive," I said, opening my arms. "You're my daughter. You always have been, always will be." She collapsed against me, sobbing like she hadn't since Laura's funeral. "I miss her so much, Dad. I got so lost without her." "I know, sweetheart. I got lost too. But we can find our way back together." The FBI agents finished their work and departed. Guests trickled out, some offering words of support, others just eager to escape the drama. Soon, only our inner circle remained in the devastated ballroom. "What do I do now?" Emma asked, looking at the wedding gifts piled on tables, the elaborate decorations, the remnants of a life built on lies. "Now," I said, "you start over. And this time, you build something real." Marcus stepped forward with a familiar set of keys. "I believe these are yours," he said, handing them to Emma. "Your dad asked me to keep them safe." Emma looked confused until she recognized them, the keys to her mother's Honda. The simple car Laura had driven to work every day, the one Emma had begged the Whitmores to let her trade for something more impressive. It's been serviced and waiting, I explained. Sometimes the best way forward is to remember where we came from. As we prepared to leave the ruins of the wedding, Emma stopped at the gift table. She picked up one particular present, a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. The tag read, "From someone who understands, J. Walsh." Inside was a compass, old but well-maintained, with an inscription, "When you're lost, true north remains constant." Emma held it up to the light, then looked at me. "Dad, will you help me find my way?" "Every step," I promised. We walked out together, leaving behind the Whitmore fantasy and stepping into the uncertain but honest future. The war was over, and while the casualties were significant, the most important thing had been saved: my daughter's soul. Behind us, the screen still showed that final image from Laura's video, our family together and whole. It was a reminder that some things matter more than money, that love can survive even the worst betrayals, and that sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is refusing to give up on their child. The valet brought my old truck around, and for the first time in months, Emma climbed in without complaint. As we drove away from the estate, she rolled down the window and let the Colorado air wash over her face, washing away the Whitmore poison with every mile. "Dad," she said as Denver's lights spread before us, "tell me about Mom. Tell me about when you two were starting out, when you had nothing but each other." So I did, sharing stories of love and struggle, of dreams built on ramen noodles and determination. And for the first time since Laura's death, I felt her presence not as an ache, but as a warm embrace, welcoming our daughter home. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I stood in the kitchen making Laura's famous vegetable soup, while Emma sat at the table sorting through job applications. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and one of her mother's old college sweatshirts. The transformation was more than external. The hardness that had crept into her eyes during her time with the Whitmores had given way to something quieter, more thoughtful. "Memorial Hospital called," she said, looking up from her laptop. "They want to interview me for the children's program coordinator position." "The one at the Laura Thompson wing?" I asked, trying to keep the pride out of my voice. "Yeah." She smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen in over a year. "Turns out, having a business degree and experience with event planning actually qualifies me for something meaningful." The Whitmore wedding planning had ironically given her skills she could use for good. The universe had a strange sense of humor sometimes. The doorbell rang, and Emma went to answer it. She returned with Jennifer Walsh, who'd become a regular visitor over the past months. The two women had bonded over their shared experience, helping each other heal from the Whitmore's manipulation. "Any news?" Emma asked, as Jennifer joined us at the kitchen table. "Richard got 25 years, Jennifer reported. "Patricia got 20. Preston?" She glanced at Emma apologetically. 15 years, but he's already trying to cut a deal by testifying against his parents." Emma's annulment had been finalized within weeks of the wedding disaster. She'd returned every gift, sold the engagement ring, and donated the proceeds to a fund for elder abuse victims. The Emma who'd been dazzled by Preston's wealth now saw him for what he was: a predator who'd targeted her vulnerability. "Good riddance," Emma said firmly. "What about the others?" 17 families have come forward so far, Jennifer continued. The FBI says it's one of the largest elder fraud schemes they've ever uncovered. The restitution fund is being set up, though most of the Whitmore assets were leveraged beyond recovery. I served soup as we discussed the ongoing investigation. The Whitmore empire had collapsed spectacularly, taking down several other fraudulent operations in its wake. The country club had revoked their membership, their properties had been seized, and their name had become synonymous with greed and exploitation. "Dad, I've been thinking," Emma said, stirring her soup thoughtfully, "about Mom's message, about what she said regarding helping others. I want to do something more than just work at the hospital." "What did you have in mind?" She pulled out a folder filled with research and notes. "A foundation. Not just for cancer research, but for families dealing with loss. Support groups, financial counseling guidance to help people avoid predators like the Whitmores when they're vulnerable. I studied her plans, seeing Laura's compassion combined with Emma's business acumen. This is wonderful, sweetheart. What would you call it? The Laura Thompson Foundation for Family Resilience, she said. Because that's what Mom taught us, isn't it? That families can survive anything if they hold on to each other. Jennifer leaned forward excitedly. I could help. My experience with my grandmother, the legal knowledge I've gained, it could help protect other families. As the two young women planned, I felt Laura's presence strongly. Not the ache of loss, but the warmth of continuation. Her values living on through our daughter's redemption. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Marcus, Harrison, Ruth, and several other friends who'd stood by us through the darkness. What had started as my support system had become Emma's extended family, the village that helped bring her home. We come bearing dessert, Marcus announced, holding up a box from Laura's favorite bakery. Chocolate cake, because some things require chocolate. As everyone settled around the table, the conversation flowed easily. No one mentioned designer clothes or country clubs. Instead, they talked about real things. Marcus's grandson learning to walk, Ruth's volunteer work at the Literacy Center, Harrison's pro bono cases for seniors. I owe all of you an apology, Emma said suddenly. You tried to stay in my life after Mom died, and I pushed you away. I was so angry, so lost. And when the Whitmores offered me a different life, I grabbed it without thinking about what I was leaving behind. Grief makes us do strange things, Ruth said gently. What matters is finding your way back. Which reminds me, Harrison said, pulling out an envelope. Emma, your father set up a trust for you years ago, but he insisted on waiting until you were ready to handle it wisely. I think that time has come. Emma looked at me in shock. Dad, no. I don't deserve… It's not about deserving, I said. It's about Laura wanting you to have choices. The trust will fund your foundation and give you the freedom to build something meaningful without worrying about survival. She opened the envelope with trembling hands, gasping at the figures. Dad, this is $2 million. Your mother insisted on that amount, I explained. Enough to make a difference, not enough to lose yourself. She was very specific about that. Emma came around the table to hug me, tears streaming down her face. How did she know? How did she know I'd need saving? Because she knew you, I said simply. The good and the bad, the strength and the vulnerability. She loved all of it. As the evening continued, Emma shared more details about her foundation plans. She wanted to create a speakers bureau of survivors, people who could share their stories and warn others about predatory schemes. She envisioned partnerships with senior centers, grief counseling programs, and legal aid societies. The Whitmores taught me how predators think, she said with grim determination. Now, I can teach others how to spot them. Jennifer raised her glass of water. To turning pain into purpose. We all toasted, and I noticed Emma was wearing her mother's pearl necklace, the one piece of jewelry that had survived her Whitmore phase. She caught me looking and touched it gently. I went to Mom's grave yesterday, she said quietly. First time since I strayed. I told her everything. About the wedding, the fraud, how lost I got. And you know what, I could swear I heard her laughing. Laughing? Marcus asked. Not mean laughing. More like she was saying, I knew you'd figure it out eventually. Like she'd been waiting patiently for me to remember who I was. That sounded exactly like Laura. Patient, loving, always believing people would find their better angels eventually. Speaking of remembering, I said, I have something for you. I retrieved a box from the cabinet, one I'd been saving for the right moment. Inside were Laura's recipe cards, the ones she'd handwritten over years of family dinners. She always said food was love made tangible, I explained, as Emma carefully examined each card. These are her love letters to us. Emma found the card for the vegetable soup we'd just eaten, stained and worn from use. Laura's handwriting noted variations, add extra carrots when Dante's had a bad day, and Double the batch when Emma's friends come over. I want to compile these, Emma said suddenly. A cookbook, but more than that. Stories about family, about gathering, about healing. All proceeds to the foundation. Your mother would love that, I said. As the evening wound down and friends began departing, each hugged Emma and welcomed her back into the fold. The family she'd rejected for the Whitmore's false promises had waited patiently for her return, proving that real love doesn't keep score. Jennifer was the last to leave. At the door, she pressed something into Emma's hand. For the foundation, she said. My grandmother's life insurance money. I wanted to help others, instead of sitting in an account, making me sad. After everyone left, Emma and I cleaned up together, falling into the easy rhythm we'd shared before everything went wrong. Dad, she said as we dried dishes, do you think Mom would be proud of who I'm becoming? I know she would, I said firmly. You fell, but you got back up. You were lost, but you found your way home. That takes more courage than never falling at all. We moved to the living room where photo albums lay scattered on the coffee table. Emma had been going through them, reconnecting with memories the Whitmores had tried to erase. Look at this one, she said, showing me a picture from her college years. I was so proud of that cheap apartment, that old car, that part-time job. When did I start being ashamed of working for things? When someone convinced you that working was shameful, I said. The Whitmores sold you a lie, that inheritance mattered more than earning that image, mattered more than substance. But lies never last. No, she agreed. They don't. We sat in comfortable silence, paging through years of genuine smiles and real moments. No staged photos at country clubs, no borrowed diamonds, just a family being themselves. I've been thinking about dating again, Emma said suddenly. Not now, but eventually. And when I do, I have very different criteria than before. Such as kindness over wealth, character over connections, someone who'd be happy eating Mom's vegetable soup in this kitchen instead of needing five-star restaurants to feel important. That's growth, I observed. That's Mom, she corrected, still teaching me lessons from beyond. The next morning, Emma and I visited Laura's grave together. The headstone was simple, just her name and dates with beloved wife and mother below. No need for grand statements. Her life had been statement enough. Emma placed fresh flowers, the same daisies Laura had grown in our garden. Hi, Mom, she said softly. I'm home, really home this time. And I'm going to make you proud. We stood there in the morning light, two people who'd lost their way in grief, but found each other again. The Whitmores had tried to destroy our family, but they'd only revealed its strength. You know what the best revenge is? Emma asked as we walked back to the truck. What's that? Living well. Real well, not Whitmore well. Building something that matters, helping people, carrying on Mom's legacy. They're in prison, but we're free. Really free. She was right. The Whitmores had lost everything chasing wealth, while we'd rediscovered what real wealth meant. As we drove home, Emma rolled down the window again, letting the morning air fill the truck. Dad, thank you for not giving up on me, for playing that video when I needed it most, for showing everyone the truth even though it could have backfired spectacularly. That's what parents do, I said. We love our children through their worst moments and celebrate their return to their best selves. And children, she asked, what do we do? You learn, you grow, and eventually you pass those lessons on to others. That's how love multiplies through generations. Emma smiled, looking more like her mother in that moment than she had in years. Then I better get started. I've got a lot of love to multiply. As we pulled into the driveway of my simple house, our home, Emma was already on her phone, setting up meetings for the foundation, reaching out to other survivors, building something real from the ashes of something false. The Whitmores had promised her a kingdom built on lies. Instead, she was building something better, a legacy of truth, compassion, and service. Laura would have been so proud. That night, as Emma cooked dinner using one of her mother's recipes, I watched her move confidently, around the kitchen she'd once disdained. Every gesture showed how far she'd traveled from lost to found, from false to true, from Whitmore to Thompson. "Hey, Dad," she called over her shoulder. "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always have, always will." And in that moment, in that simple kitchen with the scent of Laura's cooking filling the air, and my daughter finally home, I understood that we'd won something more valuable than any lawsuit or settlement. We'd won our family back. The Whitmores were behind bars, their victims were finding justice. And Emma was becoming the woman her mother always knew she could be. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's refusing to let them destroy you. As we sat down to dinner together, Emma raised her water glass. To Mom, who saw this coming and prepared for it. To Dad, who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. And to second chances, which are really just first chances to get things right. We clinked glasses, and I felt Laura's presence one more time, not as loss, but as completion. Our family was whole again, different, but unbroken, tested, but triumphant. The Whitmores had taught Emma the price of everything, and the value of nothing. Laura had taught her the opposite. In the end, the right lesson won, as it always does when love refuses to give up. Looking at my daughter across the table, I saw the little girl who'd painted masterpieces on our refrigerator, the teenager who'd rolled her eyes at family dinners, the young woman who'd lost her way, and the adult who'd found it again. All of them were Emma. All of them were loved, and all of them were finally home. "So," Emma said with a grin that was pure Laura, "what should we cook tomorrow?" And just like that, life went on. Simple, meaningful, and real. The way Laura had always known it should be. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Has someone in your life ever shown you the true meaning of family when you'd lost sight of it? Have you witnessed love triumph over greed, or seen someone find their way back from a terrible mistake? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to hear more stories about the power of redemption, the strength of family, and the enduring nature of true love. Share this with someone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to come home. Until next time, remember, the best inheritance you can leave your children isn't money or property, but values that no one can steal and love that no mistakes can break. Hold your families close, treasure the simple moments, and never underestimate the power of patient, persistent love.